follow the Dairy Cartel on Twitter or on Facebook. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Mr. Maxime Bernier.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be with you. I won't need that. I'm very pleased to be with you because we fight for the same values, and that's what I like. And I want to, first of all, congratulate you, David, and the organization for launching a real consumers, I want to say protection agency, but you're more than that. You're the choice for consumers. So thank you very much, because that's important. There's some competition in that field, as you know. Other associations are telling consumers that they want to protect them. But what they want at the end, we know all that. It is more regulation, more big government, more public intervention. And you, if you want to fight for consumers, I think that's why we share the same values. You must believe in free markets, because when you believe in free markets, you believe in freedom of choice, and that's important for consumers. We believe also in competition. When you have more competition, you have lower prices, you have better products, and that's always good for consumers. So what you're doing is very important. And it's a kind of education also at the same time. Education for Canadians, but also education to let them know that we are a rich country, because we built this country on real conservative and free market values, the Western civilization values, capitalism. Yes, we can speak about capitalism, and I will use that word. I'm proud to use it. And in my campaign, I did some interview with some journalists, and journalists asked me, I won't say who, I won't say which newspaper, but Maxime, you have a radical platform. Do you think you'd be elected on that platform? And for me, when they were asking me that question, my answer was simple. Do you think it is radical for Canadians to pay half the price for dairy, poultry, and eggs? I don't think so. Do you think it's radical for Canadians to have more competition in the telecom sector, and like that they will have better services and lower prices? I don't think so. Do you think it is radical to ask for a smaller government that will give you more freedom? I don't think so. Do you think it's radical to lower taxes? No, it is not. And you know the difference between the liberal and ourselves, and I like to say that, you know, the liberal, they elevate the government and downgrade the citizen, because they think that we always need a new government program or new spending for being sure that we'll protect Canadians and consumers. So for us, conservative and people who believe in individual freedom and personal responsibility, it is all about the human, it is all about Canadians, it is all about you and me, and that's why we have faith in people. We have faith that you have the ability, the dignity, and the right to make your own decision and determine your own destiny. That is good for Canadians, that is good for Canadian consumers, and that's why I want a smaller government, that's why I want to lower your taxes. And the other question is, Maxime, it is radical to cut taxes. You want to be sure that Canadians will save $30 billion a year. That's the cost for the Canadian government of our tax reform. But for me, it is not radical. You know, Jean Chrétien, when he was Prime Minister, and at that time, the Liberals, they were a fiscal conservative, because they had the opposition, they had Preston Manning in front of them, and the opposition was asking for no more deficit, lower taxes, and we had a smaller government at that time. So what I want to do, I want just to go back under the Chrétien era and having a smaller government like that. And we can do that together for the goods of our people and Canadian consumers. So this campaign, it is, as you know, based on 4 key principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And when I said that in the beginning of the campaign, it was important for us and for our campaign to be sure that our members and Canadians understand these principles. And I think in the beginning when I was speaking about abolishing the cartel of supply management, people, Canadians, didn't understand. First of all, didn't know that we are having a cartel and a socialist system for dairy, poultry, and eggs. And the more we explain that to the population, the better it is. And that would be the same thing for your organization. The more you'll be out there, the more you explain that freedom of choice is important, and free market is the best way to protect you, and the best way to give you more choices, the better it will be for yourself, the better it will be for the society also. And I want to thank, I work with the Montreal Economic Institute. I was VP there for only a couple of months. But I know the work that the Montreal Economic Institute did to educate the population and politicians. And that's why right now I can speak about that. And people understand they're ready for these reforms. And I'm very happy with that. Same thing with the Fraser Institute, the Frontier Institute, and all these free market think tanks. They're important, and your organization will have an important role also to play. But right now, for me as a politician, my goal is to show to Canadians that yes, you can be elected if you speak about what you believe, with passion, with conviction, without making any exception on your principle. Sorry. And that's why also we have a lot of support from the future generation, from youth people, university students. They like the freedom principle, the freedom ideas, and they believe me when I'm saying that I won't do any compromise with that. That it is why it was very important for me for my first policy to be out there and to be against supply management. They know that I have the most dairy producer. Actually, I'm the third one, I think. Merci. The third writing, I think that's not the first one, but the third. You correct me last time. So I don't have the most dairy producer, but all together with the dairy producer, the poultry producer, and the eggs producer, I have a lot of farmers under supply management in my writing. But I know it's the best thing to do, and I know that I will be elected speaking about that, because people in both, they understand, and I will gain more votes with the population standing and speaking for Canadian consumers. And right now, I must admit that I want to thank President Trump because he put the supply management in the news. And he put the supply management in the news, and now it is in the news. And I think it would be important to get rid of that for our people, but also for our trade relation with the U.S. We must have a new trade relation with the U.S., but for more freedom and for more and not more protectionism. That's why it's important to put supply management on the table and asking the Trump administration to, we are open to abolish that cartel, but we want you to do the same thing in other sectors, like stop to impose a tariff on our softwood lumber, the 20% tariff that they are imposing right now. So we must start a negotiation with more freedom, not more protectionism. And that will be, I think that will be the solution for Canadian consumers. They will have more choice. And that's why also I speak for a free trade agreement with China. If you're a conservative and you're saying that, why a free trade agreement with China, human rights, and they're communists, they're bad. But China was successful to have to build an economy and having a middle class, because yes, it's a communist country, but they open some part of their economic activities with more freedom and more free markets, and that is why they have right now a middle class in China. So, but they can improve that, as you know. They're still a socialist country and they're still having a lot of restriction, but we must be at the table with them, and that's what I want to do. At the table with them and having all these discussions about human rights, about free trade. And it took Australia 10 years to have a free trade with China, and we must start right now. They're a powerful economy right now, and I think it would be good for for Canadians. And also when we speak about free trade, it is not always about export and export and export. It must be about import. And a lot of Canadians are importing goods from China. And that would be great if we don't have any tariff. They will have lower price, and that will help them and our economy. That's what I said to President Trump when he said, you know, it's not fair that my dairy producer in Wisconsin cannot sell their milk to Canadians. I said, yes, it is not fair, but it is not fair also that our dairy producers here in Canada cannot sell their milk and poultry and eggs outside this country. I want them to export their products, and like that, it would be good for them and for us. But also what Trump is doing by imposing a tariff of 10% on our 20% on our softwood lumber, it is not fair for U.S. consumers. They will have to pay $1,000 more for a new house. So when you have trade barriers, it's always the population who's paying for that. And so that's what I want to do. That's what I'm doing in politics, and I'm doing a little bit like you, a little bit of education. And that's why we need that platform as soon as possible ready to be out there and to speak about that. It will take time for Canadians to understand our platform, and I want that to be the platform of the Conservative Party of Canada if I'm the leader in 11 days from now. But I will need you, I will need all the members of our party, all Canadians, to explain and to speak about our platform, a little bit like Mike Harris did with his Common Sense Revolution here in Ontario. And that was, at that time, bold reforms at the provincial level. So we need to do the same thing. And now Canadians, they just understand the concept of supply management. And I've been speaking about that for a year now. So that can be the same in other subjects on our platform. So we need time, we need to be out there, but I believe that at the end we'll be successful. And people will understand for having a more prosperous country, we need to have less government in Ottawa, a government that won't interfere in provincial jurisdiction, a government that will respect the Constitution, a government that will be strong, but strong in our own jurisdiction. And yes, we must invest in defense. You know, it is not normal that we have submarines in Canada that cannot go underwater, and we have helicopters that cannot fly. So we must change that, but we must take the right decision. And if we have, that is why I want to abolish corporate welfare and use that money we can save between $5 and $8 billion a year. So when I'm saying abolishing corporate welfare, I want to be clear. I'm always saying, you know, it's a grant and loan to big corporations like GM and Bombardier, but also small corporations, but also small businesses. You know, we have 4 regional agencies in Canada, one in Ontario, one in Quebec, one in Atlantic Canada, one in Western Canada. And, you know, the goal of that was for economic development, but it is not working, and also buying votes. You know, politicians, they like that. You want some votes in Atlantic Canada? Let's have a regional agency that will give grants and subsidies to businesses, and maybe we'll have votes. So I don't want to buy votes. I don't want to work with special interest groups like the cartel of supply management. I want to work for all Canadians. That's important. And that's why our platform, economic platform, it's very important that we must be able to implement that the first year of a new Conservative government. We'll save between 5 to 8 billion stopping corporate welfare, so all grants and subsidies to businesses, and we'll use that money to do in the first budget without increasing the deficit. Increasing the deficit, we'll be able to use that money to lower taxes to every single entrepreneur from 15% to 10%, but also the most important, to abolish the capital gains tax in Canada. That will be important to bring more investment. And I must add that, you know, the Trudeau government, the first budget, it was all about stimulus for the economy. You know, we need to stimulate the economy because the economic growth in Canada, it's only 1.3%. If we want to increase the standard of living in Canada, we need economic growth that would be around 3.5–4% a year. So, and the Trudeau government at the first budget, they were saying we will stimulate the economy by spending money that we don't have And like that, the economic growth at the end of the year would be maybe around 2%, 2.2%. And what happened? It was at the end of the year 1.4%. When you spend money that you don't have, it is not a stimulus for the economy. It is a sedative for the economy. And it is not fair also because you will have, and my daughters will have to pay for that, but they won't receive any benefit because 90% of the deficit right now, it is going on social programs. It is not going on roads and bridge and infrastructure. It is going on social programs. So you will have to pay for that without having any benefits. But what we are facing right now, it's the interest on the debt. It's $25 billion a year that we pay the interest on our debt. So the Trudeau government will add on the debt, as you know, it's supposed to be around $90 billion at the end of this term, without seeing the without seeing a balanced budget. So the debt will be bigger. The interest rate will go high because, as you know, the Fed in the U.S. last month, they raised the interest rate, and they were saying that they will raise again in the U.S. the interest rate. So we know that the interest rates are very low, artificially low. They will have to go up. So all that together, it won't be $25 billion a year that we'll have to pay on interest. It will be bigger than that. And $25 billion a year, it's almost the budget of the national defense in Canada. So imagine what we can do with $25 billion. We can protect our social program. So sometimes people are saying, conservative, they don't have heart, it's all about money, it's all about free markets. But, we need to be able to balance the budget to keep the social programs that we're having in Canada. I want to spend $25 billion, not on interest, but on things that are important for Canadians. So that's why we need to balance the budget. That would be fair. That's my commitment the second year. But to do that, we need to do some reform. So yes, we want to reform the CBC, Radio-Canada. Yes, we want to reform... Yes, we want to reform the CRTC in the telecom sector. More competition. Yes, we want to privatize the airport. That will be important. And what's happening right now? If you go in Europe, in Paris, London, all the big airports are privatized. I want them to be able to raise money on the capital market. I want them to be able to lower their tariff and the cost, because as you know, when they want to build their infrastructure, and they need to have money, and the only way that an airport is able to have money, because they can go on the capital market, they can raise tariff on the travelers, and they can raise fees on the transporters. So, and at the end, it's always the consumers who's paying for that. So let's privatize that, put the airport in charge of the local community. But people are telling me, Maxime, if you're doing that, my God, it would be the free market. They will want to make a lot of profits, and the fees will go high, not down. And so I'm saying to them, it's working. In Paris and London, they did it. So why it is working? Because when you privatize, you sign a contract. And in the contract, we'll have some clause, and we'll have a clause, and the government will have to approve the fees. So they won't be able to jack the price and the fees to travelers just for making more profit. So we can do like in other countries. And right now, the airports are, the federal government is receiving a lot of money from that for the rent of the land, about $300 million a year. So I want to stop that. And like that, they'll be autonomous, they'll be able to raise their money, they'll be more efficient. But it's good to do that reform for the airport. But at the same time, we must open our borders for foreign investment in the aviation sector. That's why we don't have a low-cost carriers in Canada. That's not good for Canadian consumers. Canadian consumers are paying high tariff to travel across the country because there's no competition. There's no competition with the low-cost carriers. Right now, I'm pleased to know that the Transport Minister, Mr. Garneau, he has on his desk a request for, I think, Jet, I don't remember the name, Jet, New Jet Corporation or something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, they want to build a low-cost carriers in Canada. But the problem is, half of the money is coming from UK and US. And in Canada, we don't like that. For me, that would be important to abolish these restrictions on foreign investment in the aviation sector. And I think the minister will do it. So that would be a good step. But we must abolish that. We'll have a new corporation that will compete against WestJet and Air Canada, and that would be good for Canadian consumers. So our platform, it is a platform for Canadian consumers. So that's my challenge, to explain that to Canadians, that yes, we have a lot of reform, but at the end it would be good for you. If you take healthcare, we have another reform there. It is not normal that we are spending the most in healthcare if you compare that with the OECD countries, and we still have, the worst wait time for surgery in Canada. So why not solving that? We can do that by transferring, as you know, tax points instead of money. I don't like taxes. So why I will tax Canadians and after that using that and giving that to provinces? Healthcare, it's a provincial jurisdiction, 100%. They're responsible of that. They must be able to raise money for their own responsibility. I want the provincial governments in Canada to be accountable in front of their population. So we'll transfer tax points. I will lower my taxes at the federal level, and I will let provinces tax for that. So for you, it will be neutral, but the logic of that is a province won't be able to come to Ottawa and to ask always for more money. And right now, Canadians, they don't know who to blame for the lack of services and the wait times for surgery. Is it the federal government because we don't give enough money to a province, or is it a province because they're not able to give these services at the provincial level? So that's why we need to have a system like in Europe, a mixed delivery of services, private delivery and public delivery, competition. As you know, competition is always good. Competition, and like that, we'll have a better system, but with universal coverage. We don't need to change the Canada Health Act to have more private delivery. And so that I won't change that. I won't have that debate at the federal level. But just transferring tax point, that will give the right incentive for a province to find new ways to deliver services. When you're taxing your people, when 40% of your budget is going to healthcare, a premier of Quebec or the premier of Ontario, they will think twice by taxing more and healthcare being 50% of their budget. They will look at other initiatives because they won't be able to go to the federal government and asking for more money. And I think they will go to look at in Europe and other countries. I don't want a system like in US because they don't have universal coverage. And we have private delivery right now in Canada. I was in Toronto and people told me, if you want to have a knee replacement, you can go in Montreal in the private sector, you'll have that in 2 weeks. If you want to have a hip replacement, you can go in Montreal, you'll have that in 3 days. So yes, because we have private delivery and we still have the Canadian Health Act in Canada. So the province, they will decide how much private delivery they want, and that will be their decision. But we must not be scared to do this debate with Canadians, with the population. And I'm not scared. I don't have any time to waste. I was in the private sector before, and I'm in politics for the last 11 years. And I think Canadians are ready. And this platform will be the platform of the Conservative Party of Canada. And I count on you, on people who believe in free markets to help us. And at the end, I think we'll be successful. We'll have a nice opportunity in 2 years from now. Justin Trudeau said that he'll give you more opportunities, jobs, and hope. So you don't have that right now. The unemployment rate for people between 15 and 30 years old, it's about 16%. And we have a wage stagnation in Canada. So we need to improve that. The way to do that is to have more private investment. That's why the first budget was not working. And I will finish with that. The second budget, the last budget, was not working also. Because now it was not about stimulus and for the economy. It was about innovation. That's the new thing, innovation. Small business, they don't innovate. So that's why they cannot create jobs. So it's all about innovation. But you know what? We have 147 programs in Canada for innovation. So do we need 1,000 programs for innovation? So the problem it is not innovation. Our small business entrepreneur and all the entrepreneurs in Canada, they can innovate. But the problem is a lack of investment. We need more private investment first. The cause of the lack of innovation is a lack of private investment. So that's why we need to stimulate private investment, and with our reform, we'll be able to do that. So more private investment, they would be able to innovate more, and they would be able to create jobs. So that's the logic of the platform. First year doing this reform, second year balancing the budget with our reform, and third year or fourth year implementing our tax reform for Canadians, for individual Canadians. So that, as you know, that would be a flat tax of 15% for people earning between $15,000 to 100K. And like that, 90% of Canadians will have a flat tax. And for the rich, yes, we'll do something special for the rich. They will have a tax rate of 25%. And we'll do something special for the poor. We'll raise the personal exemption in Canada. We'll raise that at $15,000. So 1.5 million Canadians won't pay an income tax in Canada. So that would be a fair reform, and we'll be able to implement that. And I want to if you want to know more details, don't hesitate to go on my website, MaximeBernier.com. And but the most important for me, my message today is we are doing the same thing. You want to work for Canadian consumers, and I want to do the same thing with this platform. I want to thank you, congratulations, and that would be a successful organization, and I'm looking forward to work with you in the near future. Merci, thank you.